Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Steve Walton. He is professor of New Testament at Trinity College, Bristol. Steve, good to see you.
Thank you, David. It's good to be with you.
Now, you're here because you've been at a conference at the Lanier Library, and so we're meeting face-to-face at this point. We're not doing this by Zoom.
This is wonderful. The conference has been a real joy, actually being in person with people, interacting, and not doing it over Zoom.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah,
That
it's
is
been
fantastic. Well, first of all, how did you get started reading Greek? How did that happen for you?
Well, I was going to train for ordination in the Church of England, and I said to my bishop, I'd like to do some Greek before I go to college. So he found me a vicar of a rural parish near where I lived in South Yorkshire in England. And I met with him once a week over the summer and got started on working through a textbook. And that was just what I needed, because it meant I hit the ground running when I arrived at Cambridge and had 3 hours of Greek a week, and it was busy.
So how far did you get? Did you get through participles in that summer? Did you get through infinitives? How far?
No, not as far as that.
Yes.
Because Wenham's textbook, which we were using,
Yes.
doesn't deal with those till much later.
Yeah.
It reckons you ought to know about third declension adjectives
Right.
before you're allowed to look at participles, because of course they use the same endings.
They use the same endings. That's what's great about Greek, is that in that second or third week, I just taught a section on perfect participles. That second or third week, you learn some endings that you have all the way through to chapter 15 or 18, working with participles.
Yeah, I tell students Greek is a really lazy language because it keeps recycling endings.
And it does. And thank God for that. Now, we are going to look at Luke chapter 1, beginning, verse 3 today. And it's a wonderful prologue that Luke has written to set the gospel up. And you're an expert, really, a world-class expert in Luke and Acts and everything. You're writing a commentary now for the Word Biblical Commentary on the book of Acts. So that's exciting. I get to be an editor on that, and so that's exciting. But there's this wonderful and yet a little bit obscure address that Luke is addressing it to. So tell us a little bit about it.
He addresses him in Greek as kratiste Theophilus, and those are vocatives. So he's using them to address Theophilus. And Theophilus has been debated, and so has kratiste. So let me say a word about each.
Each one, yes.
Theophilus, the word literally means lover of God. So the question people ask is this a real person's name, or is it just a placeholder, maybe a nickname to hide the man's real identity? Or is it just addressed to anybody who loves God?
Right. My
doctoral supervisor, Loveday Alexander, did her doctoral work on this passage, and she's pretty sure Theophilus is a real person. We've got inscriptional evidence of that name across the Mediterranean, and it looks as though it's entirely plausible as a real person.
Well, the thing that strikes me as being unlikely that it's a fictive person that everybody can find themselves in, kind of, I'm a lover of God, you're a lover of God, we're all lovers of God, is the fact that it begins kratiste. Because if it were just a fictive person, it seemed like you wouldn't use that.
Yes.
Right? So what does kratiste add to that?
Yeah. A kratistos is somebody of equestrian rank. In other words, they're entitled to ride a horse. In British society, it's roughly the equivalent of being a knight, of being sir, or if you're a woman, being a dame.
So like Sir Paul McCartney.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
So a person of rank, somebody who's impressive.
Yeah, and somebody who, is probably in the top 3% in terms of social status. And social status in the ancient world isn't necessarily just about how much money you've got, it's about who you're connected with.
Right.
And kratiste means somebody has made you that. Somebody has given you that rank. So you don't inherit it as a rank from your parents. It's a rank you're given. So this is a person of considerable authority and power who could be appointed as a governor of a province, for instance. We know examples of governors, and there are two in the book of Acts, who are called kratistos. Felix and Festus, later in the book of Acts, are both addressed by Paul as kratiste. So this is the kind of person who could hold a really significant position in the power structure of the Roman Empire.
So would Theophilus then be a person that could be appointed a governor then, you think?
Yes. I mean,
so he's at the same rank as a governor or something? Or
we just don't know any more about this individual than that Luke addresses his gospel and his book of Acts to him.
Yeah.
And we wish we knew more.
Sure. Now, this is unique among the Gospels, isn't it? I mean, no other Gospel is dedicated like this.
No, that's right. And that suggests that Theophilus has something to do with, I hesitate to use the word, but something to do with the publication of the two books. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to use the word because publication doesn't mean the same as we think of it.
Right.
As meaning. We think of printing and publishing electronic copies on the internet and so on. Whereas in the ancient world, publication meant physical copying. And you
letter by letter, by hand.
Yeah. And a professional scribe, it was not cheap to hire a professional scribe to copy a book out.
And Luke and Acts both are two of the longest books in the New Testament.
So you'd need about 35 feet of scroll.
To do them both.
Yeah, to do each.
Oh, to do each one. Oh, I see.
Which is about the longest roll of papyrus that we know of. So it's a really long book. These are the two longest books, perhaps apart from Matthew, in the New Testament. Between them, they take up over 25% of the New Testament, Luke and Acts.
Luke and Acts together.
Yeah.
Well, it's an impressive book, but this title, Kratiste Theophile, is really, to me, interesting. At one point, I thought, probably a fictive person, just representing anybody out there. I'm dedicating this book to anybody out there who loves God. As opposed to, no, there's a real person who may be a believer, may not be a believer quite yet, but maybe he is on the way.
Yes, and the way Luke addresses him and says, I want you to know the truth concerning the things that you've learned about, suggests he knows some things already. He doesn't call him Adelphi, brother. And if he were a fellow believer, you might expect that, because Adelphos, brother, is one of the common ways that the believers describe each other in the book of Acts. There are about half a dozen ways that the believers are spoken of in Acts, and one of the prominent ones, is as brothers and sisters. So it might suggest Theophilus is somebody who is on the journey towards faith in Jesus, or he may be somebody who's begun his journey of faith and been baptized, and Luke's wanting to help him along the journey. It's hard to know. This is on my long list of questions I want to ask Luke when I meet him.
When you see him. Well, thanks, Dr. Walton, for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
You're most welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who helped us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, our first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.